On Thursday, July 7, the Montreal Canadiens are going to be hosting the NHL draft at the Bell Center. The last time they did, the fans were chanting Louie, Louie when the Canadiens were set to make their first pick, 18th overall. Louie Leblanc was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. Unfortunately, things didn't pan out the way either party wanted them to. Only 50 games in the National Hockey League, 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 points. He's been retired since 2016. He'll talk to us about the pressures of being drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, of playing in Montreal, and things he may have wished he would have done differently. It's the Sick Podcast. It's Brunchin with Marinaro. Louie Leblanc is coming up.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
Now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer. Intense by nature.
And good Sunday morning. Marinaro, the Sick Podcast, brought to you by 8.6 Beer. Intense by nature. The beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. And it's almost here. It's Sunday, and the draft goes this Thursday, July 7th and 8th. Thursday, of course, is going to be round 1, and then Friday is going to be round 2, all the way until the end. And it's, we're going to have the sickest draft party that you've ever seen, and we're going to have it at La Cage at the Centre Bell starting at 6 p.m. on Thursday night. RSVP, because your spots are limited. You're going to have to RSVP with La Cage at the Bell Center. The last time the Montreal Canadiens hosted the NHL draft was in 2009. I was there. I was sitting in the stands, or actually, I don't even know if it was a stands. There were tables set up actually for the media. And when the Canadiens were set to make their pick, there was still a young man from Kirkland, Quebec that was on the board. And with the fans chanting Louie, Louie, Trevor Timmins went up and he made the pick. Louie Leblanc, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. He joins me today. Louie, good morning.
Good morning, Tony. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
Thanks for doing this. I would imagine that with the Canadiens hosting the draft on Thursday, you're a pretty popular guy right about now, and I'm probably not the first one to reach out to you, am I?
You're not, but I'm happy to be on the show, and thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome, Louie. Let's go back. You're playing with the Omaha Lancers in the USHL, 59 points in 60 games. Scouts coming to see you for sure, talking to you, talking to your coaches. At the time, did the Montreal Canadiens come see you? Did they pull you aside? Did they talk to you prior to the draft?
Yes, they did. That year in Omaha, there was a player named Danny Cristo who was drafted by the Canadiens already. So Trevor Timmins, came to Omaha a few times to see Danny obviously play and then, do his scouting duties as he would. So I think Trevor obviously came to Omaha a couple times that year, and I did speak to him once during the season. But that was about it. I ended the season in Omaha, and then the combine was in Toronto that year. I think it's in Buffalo now. But anyways, back then it was in Toronto, and I had met with basically every team. I had met with the Canadiens, but I had no inclination that they were going to pick me. I actually had not better meetings, but just better conversations with other teams, like the Buffalo Sabres at 13 and Anaheim Ducks at 15, and had really good meetings, and then left Toronto, and then went back home, and then waited for the draft in June, essentially.
Every player that goes to the draft, the first thing is they just want to get drafted. They want to play in the National Hockey League. The second thing is, if they can, they like to go to a place that they'd like to go to. Did you want to be a Montreal Canadian? I
did. I mean, growing up in Montreal, I'll go to the Molson Center with my dad, watch games. You don't really believe that that's going to happen one day, but as a kid, you're allowed to dream, and it was my dream to play in the NHL. But then, of course, playing for the Montreal Canadiens was, something that I would, I was hopeful for. But as a kid, you never know how good you are, and you never know how things are going to turn out. So, I had that dream in mind. But yeah, I mean, it was becoming more of a reality as I progressed through hockey, and as I played midget, and I was a dominant player, and then I got went to Omaha and did well there. So as the years go on, you kind of see where you might fit into an organization.
Let's bring up the list of the top 30 that were selected the year you were drafted in 2009. All right, so there you have it. John Tavares, number 1 with the New York Islanders. Victor Hedman, number 2 with Tampa Bay. Matt Duchene at 3 with Colorado. Evander Kane, 4, Atlanta. Braden Shen, 5, Los Angeles. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 6, Phoenix. Nazem Kadri, 7 with Toronto. Scott Glennie, number 8 with Dallas. Jared Cowan, number 9 with Ottawa. Edmonton at number 10 takes Magnus Puljujarvi. At number 11, Nashville takes Ryan Ellis. There's a pretty good pick, huh? At 12, the Islanders take Calvin DeHaan. 13, the Buffalo Sabres. You said that you had a conversation with the Buffalo Sabres. It sounds like at number 13, if you were available, that you were going to go there. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, the day before the draft, I had actually 2 meetings, one with Buffalo and one with Anaheim, and they both said, if you're available tomorrow at 13 or 15, we're picking you, right? So,
wow.
I mean, I guess what must have happened is obviously Zach Kassian, I think it was Holland, were ahead of me. They didn't get picked by another team, so
I got it.
I mean, I'm guessing that's what happened. I mean,
everyone follows their list, right? They scratch off names, and when it's their turn, the guy who's at the top of their list is the guy that they end up picking.
Yeah, in theory, I think that's how it works. So those 2 guys must have been obviously higher than me on their list, and they didn't get picked. So, the cards didn't play out the way they thought it would. But, I was still available at 18. But honestly, after 15, I had no idea where I was going. I knew Pittsburgh at 30th had told me, we wish we could draft you, but you're not going to be there at 30. So, good luck in the draft. We'll take you if you're at 30, but you probably won't be there. So that was the only point of reference that I had, But yeah, after 15, I had no clue where I was going. So
they're born in Point Claire, living in Kirkland, grew up a Canadiens fan, watched a lot of games in the Molson Center. You're there with your family. The Canadiens have the pick at 18. The place is chanting Louie, Louie. Do you feel excited inside, or do you feel like throwing up at that point? Like, talk to me about the nerves, whether it was anxious energy or whether you were really nervous about the way things were going down.
I think it was a bit of both. I mean, I was kind of numb, to be honest, when they were chanting my name, and I didn't know if Trevor was going to draft me, right? Like, I had no idea. So, but then when I did hear the Omaha Lancers, I knew it was me. So, it was a relief. But, obviously my life changed, for forever at that moment.
Let's try and live that moment of you being selected once again, 13 years later. Let's do it right now. All right, there you have it. Oh my God, Louie, 13 years later, I feel like I'm going to cry. I mean, like what a beautiful moment. I mean, can you begin to put into words what it feels like to be drafted by a National Hockey League team after all the years of minor hockey, your parents driving you here, there, and everywhere, every game, every practice, every tournament, playing through bumps and bruises? Could you begin to put into words what it feels like to be drafted?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard. There's not one word that describes a moment like that. I think it's culmination, like you said, of all the hard work and the sacrifices that my parents have done. Mostly my parents, right? If my parents didn't bring me to hockey, I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't have that draft day. So it was a moment that I was proud of, and I was relieved, right? Like, as a player, you never know. You want to get drafted, but you just don't know where you're going to get drafted. So I was relieved, but I knew the work that was ahead of me, right? Like, it only starts on draft day. It's not an end, right? So, I enjoyed that day. I enjoyed that night. I enjoyed the next few days. But then, a few weeks later, I was at development camp in Brossard, and, the spotlight was on me. Expectations were set. So yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic night for sure.
Before we get to that development camp, we're going to go through your memory bank for a second here, okay? What happened from the moment you were drafted for probably the next 48 hours? How much of it do you remember? Like, what did you do? You get drafted, you go do the interviews, you meet with the media, you meet with the Canadians. Did you talk to Trevor Timmins? Did you talk to Jacques Martin? Did you talk to George Gillette? Did you talk to Pierre Boivin? Did you go party with your family? Did you go party with your friends? Talk to me about all that. The next 40 hours.
So you walk down the stairs, you get on stage, they give you your jersey, they give you your hat, you walk down, and then Dominique Saillant at the time, brings you to the back, and then there's, I don't know, 100, 150 media members there, and they all have their questions. So I think that took about an hour, and after that, there's other rooms in the Bell Center. And then you sign like hockey cards, jerseys, pucks, take pictures, and all that. That takes another hour, 2 hours. And then by the time, I don't know, it was probably like 11 o'clock. Left the Bell Center, went out with my friends that night. Had a few drinks, celebrated, and it was pretty fun. All my friends were there, and we had a great time. The next day was round 2. And Jacques Martin had invited me to, sit with them at the table for round 2 to would have been 11 back then, 12. Anyways, I don't remember how many rounds there were, but I sat there.
I'll get it in a second. Hold on a second. I'll get it in a second. Round 7.
It was still 7. Yeah, I thought there were more
7 rounds.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Louie, we don't hear you. We don't hear you.
You hear me now? I don't hear you. Hello? Tony? Hello?
You hear me?
I hear you now. Yep.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that. All right. Don't know what happened there, but it looks like there was 7 rounds, Louie. 7 rounds, 211 picks. Actually, the Canadians had the last pick. Petteri Simula, a goalie out of Finland, 211. So it was 7 rounds. So hold on a second. So Jacques Martin invited you to sit with him at the draft table. You sat throughout the entire day?
I sat throughout maybe, I don't know, the next 2, 3, 4 rounds, right? And then I left.
Hold on a second. Louie, what time did you get home that night?
You mean that morning?
Yeah. What time did you get home?
I don't know, probably 3, 4, 5. I don't remember. It was a late night. It was fun. Yeah, I got to the Bell Center the next morning. And then I sat with Jacques for a few rounds. Then I went up to the Canadians box and just sat with, other members of the organization. We chatted. And then at the end of the draft, Canadians hosted a nice dinner for all the families, all the players that got drafted.
That's nice.
So that was at 4 or 5 o'clock. And then, that night I had a family dinner, just, celebrate again, because the night before it was so late that, my parents did not come party with me. So that night we had another family dinner, and then that was the Saturday. The Sunday I went back to Kirkland. Dust settled a little bit. There was still media interviews and all that, and then I believe the next Wednesday the development camp started in Brossard.
Wow. From the moment you got drafted, at that point, does everybody recognize you? Like when you leave your house, when you get in your car, when you're driving, when you go to places, are people looking at you in the restaurant and saying, see that guy? That's the guy the Canadians drafted.
Yeah, I mean, the following days, yes, because it was all over the news. Every news outlet had me on the front page, every paper. I remember, and I still have copies of those at home. They're good memories to have. And but yeah, I mean, you go out to a restaurant, and the bar guy or the manager says, drinks on me. You don't have to pay for any. Like it's just,
yeah,
it's definitely special, and you don't realize it back then, but like nowadays, like I gotta pay for my beers, right, or whatever I do, right? So, but yeah, it was special. I mean, everywhere in Montreal that summer, everybody knew me. I'd be skating, and you have like hundreds of kids just watching you skate, and whether Pierrefonds or Dollard, and it was cool. It was definitely something that you can't really prepare for as growing up, but I really knew what it meant to be, drafted by the Canadians then, and experience all that.
Yeah, you don't have to pay for all your beers because I'm going to end up sending you a case of 8.6, which is intense by nature. You're really going to love it. All right. Okay. So
thank you.
It comes in different percentages of alcohol. This one here is 7.9%. Is that good?
Beautiful. Are you having one right now, Tony, or?
No, not right now, but I will later this afternoon when I'm going to be hanging out in my spa. But anyway, that's another story for another day. You took a very important decision. All right. Well, first of all, the development camp. How did it go?
Good. I mean, the development camp is made for the team, all the scouts, the coaches to really get to know the players. I mean, only a few, like Trevor Timmins knew me and maybe other scouts, but like the coach doesn't really know you. The other, the GM might have seen you play, may not. So I think that week is really for the team to get to know the players and see them on the ice for the first time all together. So it was a good week. There's physical testing, on ice testing, off ice testing, scrimmages, and it went well. Honestly, it was short, but there was nothing too crazy that came out of it.
You took a very important decision. It was to go play that season, the following season after the draft, at Harvard. And you stayed for 1 year. And then after that, you went to the Montreal Juniors and the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. I think there was a lot of pressure from a lot of people to try to get you there. When you look back, and I know hindsight is 2020, do you wish you would have stayed at Harvard?
Yeah, I mean, Tony, obviously this is a question that, many have asked me. Looking back, probably for my hockey career, it would have been better to stay and develop and take my time, not in the spotlight, that I did in Montreal with Harvard, the Harvard program and Coach Donato. And I know at the time, many NHL executives didn't think Harvard was a good place for hockey development. And, over the years, Coach Donato has proven them wrong, with developing Adam Fox, who's not a bad hockey player.
Yeah.
John Marino, Ryan Donato, Alex Kerfoot, Alex Killorn, right? Wow. Like those are not just average hockey players, right?
No.
So I think the tide has changed, right? And NHL teams are respecting the program. But at the time it wasn't, many teams, like even at the combine, were saying, why are you going to Harvard? You're wasting your time. It's not a hockey program. It's, it's obviously a great school, but it's, if you really want to be a hockey player, right? That was a big question.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, looking back, I mean, probably should have stayed, but, I could also turn it around and say, well, if I went back, maybe I wouldn't have played in the National Hockey League, right? Like,
of course. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so, I don't want to confuse you even more here. We're just obviously having When I look back and I think you should have stayed at Harvard too, because you needed to beef up a little bit. And the one thing I know from the schools in the States, obviously, is you don't have very long hockey seasons. You don't play that many games. I think you play games in the 30s, right? Mid 30s or whatever it is. Yeah. But you spend a lot of time in the gym, right? And you work on your body and you have time to develop physically and mature. You're usually in those programs for about 4 years. You have time. You don't burn yourself out. I mean, junior hockey is great, I think, for the McDavids and the McKinnons of this world who are just, hockey machines, and they need to play and they already have maybe that kind of body. Right. But I think you needed to physically mature. And I think you were better off at Harvard than you were in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Would you agree with that assessment? Or
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, looking back, that's probably a fair assessment. So yeah, I mean, every player has different development curves,
Yeah.
and
but
yeah.
Louie, did you feel pressure to leave Harvard and to go play Quebec Major Junior Hockey, because a lot of people were telling you Harvard's not very good for hockey, and maybe some were telling you internally with the Canadians that they wanted to see you closer to home, maybe? Or
yeah, I mean, there's definitely pressure from everyone, right? I was a first round pick for the Canadians, a French Canadian that grew up in the area. The Canadians at the time were struggling, right? They needed a new blood, a new player to come in and help them out. And it was my World Junior year as well. I had got cut the year before, and the reason why, well, one of the reasons is because I didn't play enough games and all that stuff. So with the Canadians, they thought it would be a better opportunity and better for my development to leave Harvard and sign with a junior team. It didn't have to be the Montreal Juniors, but and then make the World Juniors that year, which I did, which was a great experience.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's a lot of different factors that went into that decision. But ultimately, it was for my hockey development and the people that were around me and giving me advice. That was the best decision at the time, right?
Yeah.
So,
now, probably one of the best things about Harvard was, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know this for a fact, but you probably had a scholarship, and by doing 1 year, were you able to go back? Because I know you completed your studies in 2019.
Right.
Were you able to go back and ride off of that scholarship?
Right. So Tony, the way it works, the Ivy League schools in the U.S. do not offer sports scholarships. Right.
Oh, that's right. Ivy's, yeah, correct. Okay.
So even if Connor McDavid wanted to go to Harvard, if his family could afford it, he would have to pay. Right. Like,
wow. Okay.
That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
So and the way they do it is they look at your family income, your net worth, and they give you a price essentially, right? You make this, we think you could afford this. This is the price, right? So that's how it works. But the nice thing about Harvard, like you said, once you get in, you could always go back, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, right? You need to tell them why you left and what you were doing.
Yeah.
And if the story makes sense, which it did, I left to play in the NHL and pursue my childhood dream. They welcomed me back, and I was fortunate enough to graduate, work with the hockey team for 3 years. Skated with guys, helped out. A guy, I'm not taking credit for Adam Fox because he's a magician out there, and but worked with Adam Fox, John Marino, Alex Kerfoot, Ryan Donato, all these guys. I was able to help them as an assistant coach essentially, and stay involved in hockey, and it was a great experience. So yeah.
Now you're working in Boston right now after completing your studies in 2019 at Harvard. You graduated from what exactly?
Degree in economics and sociology, and now I'm working at a company called Oliver Wyman, and it's a management consulting firm. And I mean, they're all over the world. There's an office in Montreal, but yeah, I'm in Boston. I'm doing that. Essentially, what I do is I work for private equity firms looking to acquire companies, and we do due diligence work. So we look at their financials, we conduct interviews, we conduct market surveys, and we essentially recommend if they should acquire or not the company.
Louie, after talking with you, you're obviously a very intelligent gentleman. You can offer families so much because you are a former National Hockey League player who was drafted 18th overall in the first round by his hometown team. You got to experience what it was, the pressures of playing in the city that you live in. You took decisions to go to Harvard. You took a decision to leave and go to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. You saw how it impacted your life, both positively and negatively. You can offer a lot to a lot of families. Do people pick up the phone and call you and say, "Hey, Louie, my son is in this situation. What do you think?" Does that happen?
Yeah, they do for sure. And I've, over the last few years, I've spoken to many families. I still do, on a regular basis, helping out, some kids that are in midget and figuring out what they're trying to figure out. Like, do I go to juniors? Do I go to college? Do I go to the prep school? Do I go USHL? Right? Do I go to BCHL? And I find joy in helping these families and talking to the parents, talking to the kids, and figuring out, what they actually want and what the best way to achieve that, right? So, I think with my background, I've been able to play in most leagues. I played in midget, I played in the USHL, I played in the Q, I played in the American League, I played in the NHL, played in Europe. So, like I said, I find joy helping these families. I know hockey's a complicated world. It's complex. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of paths that lead to, wherever you want to end up. So, looking back, my family didn't have, much help, but, it worked out. But, we had an agent back then, and but there's just so much to know. It's impossible to really know exactly what's happening.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's take a look. The draft is going to be on Thursday. And here in Montreal, of course, you're in Boston, but you're probably hearing about it. The big discussion is whether or not the Canadiens are going to draft Shane Wright or Uri Slafkowski, or actually surprise everyone and end up drafting Logan Cooley with the first pick overall. But those are pretty much the consensus top three. No one knows who's going to go number one yet. Shane Wright has been the projected number one pick for the last 4 years, with the exception of the last 3 months, right? It gets to now, and now all of a sudden everyone's saying, well, Slafkowski was great at the Olympics and he was great at the World Championships. He's number one. If you could have a word with Shane Wright leading up to the draft, and he's hearing all these things left, right, and center, what would you tell him?
I mean, I think the most important thing is just to block all of that out, right? Like he's been a great player, or whoever gets drafted, right? For that matter, like, these guys are elite hockey players, the best in the world, best in their age group. And it's just to block all this stuff out, right? Like, whether you get picked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like, yeah, it's great. You want to be the number one overall pick, but like, these guys have performed their whole life, and this is just one day in their life, right? It's a big day. It's an important day, but if they're able to block all that out and just focus on what really matters is putting the puck in the net, making assists, making their teammates better, and contributing to a team, I think they'll be fine, right? Like, that's, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
Can an 18-year-old start in Montreal? Let's say they draft Shane Wright. Where would you want to see him play next season?
I mean, I'll be honest, I have never seen him play. I don't know, I don't know how good he is. Is he ready physically? Is he ready mentally? All that, those are question marks for me. But, forget all that. I think what's important is the player is going to have to be well-rounded with, good leadership, good mentors. He's coming into a city that's, looking for a superstar, right? The Canadiens have struggled a little bit over the last few years, up and down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are they rebuilding? Like I don't really know. But what I know is that the player coming in is going to have a lot of pressure. And, as you know, Tony, fans are not, forgiving in Montreal. They want results immediately. And the day he steps into Brassard or the Bell Center in Montreal, like, they're going to expect results immediately.
Yeah.
Right? It may take time. It may take a few months. It may take a few years, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at the Montreal market, is the way it is.
And that's why, if he's the guy, I'd like to see the Canadiens, and I know I'm probably not in the majority here, I'd like to see him send them back for another year of junior hockey, because this is what I know. He was not a dominant player in the Ontario Hockey League. I believe he finished 8th in scoring. He was good in the playoffs, but he wasn't dominant there either. He missed out on just over a year of hockey due to the cancellation of the OHL because of COVID. And Montreal is a different animal than any other city or any other team or organization, and media and expectations and pressure. And, it would probably be a difficult situation for him to come in at 18. Having said that, Montreal, you lived it. Like you said, the beers are on the house. You don't have to pay for the drinks. You're a rock star everywhere you go. You're a hot commodity. People start looking at you. You're in everyone's eye. How do you think an organization should insulate a player who's going to come in, probably be drafted at first overall, have rock star status right away when he gets here, whether they bring him in year 1 or year 2? How would you, Louie Leblanc, knowing what you know, want to insulate a player like that who's probably not from here, right? So you were from here, you got to stay with your family, but either of these players will not be from Montreal. In your world, how should they insulate this player?
Right. I think the first idea comes to mind is what the Pittsburgh Penguins did with Sidney Crosby, right? Like he stayed with Mario Lemieux, right? And living with a guy like that who's a Hall of Famer, a winner at all levels, arguably one of the best players of all time. They took Sidney and they, basically said, you're living in Mario's basement. Or Mario said, you're coming to live with me, right? I mean, I think Mario owned the team at the time. So, will Montreal do that? I don't know. Who is that guy in the Canadiens or in the organization that, could take him under his wing? I don't know, right? Is it
Josh Georges? If you can, Josh Georges did that with Brendan Gallagher, right? And Brendan turned out to be a pretty solid NHLer.
Exactly, right? So that's another example, right? So I think the Canadiens definitely have to consider that whoever they pick, and they have to find somebody in the team that's willing to, take on the role of a mentor essentially, and showing the kid the ropes, right? I know, they have a few guys that could probably take on that role. Maybe a guy like Brendan Gallagher, right? Who knows, lived with Josh and, maybe able to bring that on to the next kid. Yeah. I remember, I think it was Galchenyuk. I think Galchenyuk had his parents move to Montreal and he lived with them. Again, there's different ways to do it, but I think living with a former player or a player that's on the team could really help one's development.
Here's a picture with you with Bob Gainey. Let's bring it up when you were drafted. There you go, who was the then general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. Louie, it's a tough question, but you're a big boy, so I'm going to ask it. When you look back, would you have rather you weren't drafted by the Canadiens? And then once again, I know we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what your career would have become, but you're 31 years old. You could still be playing in this league right now, but you've been retired since 2016. When you look back, do you think that as cool as it was, a hometown kid to be drafted by his hometown team, that it probably wasn't the ideal situation for you?
Yeah, probably not the ideal situation, but do I regret it? No, because the moments that I've lived I have no words to describe that, right? Like it's memories that I'll have forever. I wore the Canadiens jersey for 50 games. Not many people could say they have done that. And yes, of course, playing 1,000 games in the NHL and making $30 million is obviously very appealing. And I think everybody would want that. But, what I've learned, throughout my time with the Canadiens, the 3-year contract that I had, the ups and downs with Hamilton Bulldogs, the Canadiens, I'm just a better person today. And I'm proud to have worn the jersey. And, yes, another team might have been better. Who knows? But yeah, I'm very humbled and thankful for the opportunity that they've given me.
No, you're right. Making $30 million is pretty cool. That's why I decided to continue with the podcast. Hey, Louie, if you don't mind, we have some people that, have a couple of questions for you. Sure. And you know what you just said, Louie? I'm glad you said what you said, and I'm going to tell you why. Because you know that the word bust is prevalent when people talk about draft picks, right? You hear that, right? He's a draft star. He's a draft bust. Yeah. And it's the hardest league in the world, right? It's the best league in the world. The National Hockey League is the 700 best hockey players in the world. And if you play one game in the NHL, it's one game more than I played because I wasn't good enough to play in the National Hockey League. And the fact that you played 50 games, unfortunately, you're going to have some people sitting on their sofa saying you was a draft bust. The reality is you played in the best league in the world. And how many can say that?
I mean, yes, I agree. And, I obviously hear that word. And every June or I guess now July, the draft's in July, I'll be on a list of players that, the Canadiens drafted and didn't turn out the way to be. And, somebody will write a blog or an article and blah, 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 and all that stuff, which is fine, right? That's the reality of it. But
it hurts though, Louie, to read stuff that obviously it's.
I mean, it definitely hurts, but I know deep down that I've done everything I could. Right. And, if I had, gone out every night drinking and partying and not working out and not training and not skating and just, just slacked off for the whole career. And the people who know me well know that I, work super hard at everything I do and give it my best. Right. So the cards played out the way they did, and I have no regrets. Should I have done stuff differently? Yeah. You always, looking back, you could, adjust things that you've done, but at the time, with the information that I had and whatever the plan was at the time, I stuck to the plan and did what I could, right? So the word bust, it's definitely not fun to hear, but the people saying that are usually people not in the business, and the people probably have never played either, right? So it is what it is. Fans in Montreal are passionate, and they're entitled to their opinion, and that's fine. That's totally fine, right? So I have no remorse, and I have no hard feelings against those words.
No, and I'm happy you said what you said, because a lot of your former teammates, and I'm not just saying this because this is true, a lot of your former teammates have gone on record. They've actually done interviews, they've done podcasts, and they've said it. You're one of the hardest working guys on the ice and off the ice that they have ever seen. And so you did what you had to do in that respect, for sure. If you're liking this podcast, if you're loving this podcast, comment sick right now on all social media channels. We are live on Twitter right now, and we are live on YouTube, and we are live on Facebook. So if you love it, comment sick. If you have questions for Louie Leblanc, I'm going to keep Louie for another 7 or 8 minutes here if we can. Get in your questions right now. Let's go to them, Louie. Okay, Ethan says, do you still keep up with the Habs?
I do. I mean, I don't watch every game. When I have the opportunity, I do watch. I follow the news. I Twitter, Instagram, RDS, TVA Sport. I look at what's happening. I definitely follow them more than other teams. But to say that I watch every game, I just don't have time right now.
Yeah, follow the Sick Podcast too, because we're gonna have some.
I will.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, Scott Ray. Can you ask Louie who is the best player he has ever played with?
That's an interesting question. I mean, on the Canadians, honestly, I have to say Carey Price.
Yeah.
He is amazing. Like, he's a goalie, so maybe you were looking for a forward or a defenseman, but like, he is he's a competitor, he's a winner. He, you'll shoot on him, and every puck, he wants to stop every puck, right? And even if you have an open net and you just kind of dog the shot, like, he is diving for the puck in practice. So like, I was super impressed by Carey, and I know he hasn't had an easy time in the last few years, but I think he's the best goalie in the world for sure. Have
you been watching Caulfield and Suzuki?
I have. They're unbelievable. They're dynamic. Really, eh? They're having fun on the ice. Again, Caulfield's a college kid, right? So, they're great. I mean, I think the future of the Canadians is great with those two guys. Hopefully they could build around them, add a few more pieces, but they are very dynamic, and I think that's what the Canadian fans want.
A few more questions. Let's go. This coming from Alessandro Izzi. Hey, Louie, which Habs player were you looking forward to see and play with?
I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that I played with in Montreal that were all special, right? Like, a guy like PK Subban was super fun to play with, dynamic. You knew every time he would come to the rink, he would bring his game, right? Like, it was not always pretty, but he would show up and compete. Guys like Mike Camilleri were elite scorers, right? Like, learned so much from him. A guy like Scott Gomez, obviously, when I was there, he was not performing, but like, just a guy with experience, right? I think he won 2 cups with Jersey. Just guys like locker room guys with so much knowledge around the game that a guy like me coming up, it was just really impressive.
Poor guy. When I think about it, I gave it to Gomez pretty good back in the day. I think everyone did, but as much money as he was making, he must have gone through hell not having scored a goal and how many games it was. I even lost count and stuff like that, but a lot of pressure when everyone in the entire city, including members of the media, is saying 5 games without a goal, 10 games without a goal, 20 games, 30 games, 40 games, 50 games. Not fun.
No, it's not fun. And then what people have to realize is like Scott wasn't coming to the rink and saying, I hope I don't score again tonight, right? Like it wasn't
Of course
like
not.
he like every player is proud, whether you're making $100,000 or 10 million, like you want to perform, you're wearing a jersey. Like it's not fun for you. It's not fun for your family. So like, yeah, every player wants to perform and they're proud players. So it was definitely not fun for anyone.
Yeah. I wish I could take back some of those things I said, Scott. My apologies. I was just trying to get good ratings. All right. Next. Members of the media could be jerks sometimes. John Laurie, would you ever come back as a coach?
I think so. I mean, it's definitely something I consider. When I retired from hockey, I went back to school and I was an assistant coach with the Harvard team for 3 years. So that was a lot of fun. Gave me a taste of what coaching was like. Maybe down the road. I mean, I have no immediate plans, but maybe if the right opportunity comes around, I may consider it for sure.
All right, why don't we do this? 3 more, very quick. MG, Louie, thank you for doing this. Question: what are your best memories from the draft in Montreal when you were drafted?
Just meeting the organization, meeting some of the alumni like Guy Lafleur, and just Hall of Famers of the Canadians, right? We're there at the draft, and they, at the dinner the next day, they were all there, shaking your hand and welcoming you to the Canadians organization. I think that is something so special and something I'll never forget. Yeah,
look at my Lafleur chair right there in the corner. You see it?
I do. Beautiful.
That's my Guy Lafleur chair. Yeah, love the flower. 2 more. Here we go. Yanni, pardon me. What exactly would you have done differently?
Good question. I mean, I know we talked at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
Staying in school versus not staying in school. Looking back, probably stay in school for another year. I think that would have been the first, thing I would have changed.
Louie, here's the last one for you. Matt says, "Hi, Tony, sick podcast. Can you ask Louie the difference in difficulties between the USHL, NCAA, and the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League?"
So the NCAA is a much older league, right? Players typically go in as a freshman. There's obviously the 18-year-old freshman, but, most will go in as 19, 20, even 21-year-old, right? So guys are a lot more mature, physically stronger. So that's one big difference between the Q and college hockey. The difference between the junior major and the USHL, kids are the same age group. The high-end talent will probably go the junior major route, right? You won't get a Connor McDavid going to the USHL, so you won't have that elite player. But, I think they've done games in the past, like the Ramparts have played, I think the Omaha Lancers, and I forget who won, but it was close hockey, right? It wasn't a blowout on either side, I believe. So they're both very good leagues, both intense. And players want to play in the NHL at the end of the day, right? So, I think those are the main differences.
All right. If I can, in ending, I'd like to bring up the producer, Sammy, and our CEO, his father, Agnello. Guys, come up. I want to bring you up here for a second.
How are you?
I think they live they live pretty close to your parents in Kirkland, Quebec. My question to you is, when are you coming down from Boston to Kirkland so we can have a barbecue? At Agnello's, of course.
I think in August. So if I'm around for a few extra days, I'll definitely give you guys a call and be happy to have an 86 beer, right? It's called 86.
8.6. I'm going to get you your case of beer. The second you get down, you let me know and I'll deliver it to your parents' house. There'll be a case waiting for you there and a case at Agnello's house when you come for the barbecue. We're on, okay? We're on.
Make sure you call us. Make sure you call us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure.
Louie, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. One of the guys that I really really respected the most since I've been in the media, because you've always been great with members of the media and always been great with me. And thanks. I hope you had as much fun doing this as I did today. Thanks again.
Anytime, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one, Louie. All right. This coming in from Matthew Jarvis. We'll bring it up. Louie, have a great day. Just like Tony, this podcast and Louie are sick. Best of luck in your future endeavors, Louie. All right. The message is out there. I'm Marinaro. This is the Sick Podcast. This podcast is sick. I tried telling you for a couple of years. It's only going to get better. Wait till you see and hear what we have stored during the hockey season. My God. Mamma mia. All right. Follow us on all social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. I'm Marinaro. Who's better than me? Nobody.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature.